Isabel Hilton is founder and senior advisor of China Dialogue. I asked her how important it is for countries to look beyond their borders when trying to protect Earth's biodiversity.
There are countries that have grown rich, essentially, the better off countries, and they've done it by both emitting carbon and exploiting their own natural capital. We're at a point now where the world doesn't have enough natural capital for that model, which is a very old-fashioned model of development, to continue. But in order to support countries that have yet to develop, to do it another way, which is what we all need, there is an obligation, there's a moral obligation, there's also a lot of self-interest, frankly, in supporting them to preserve their nature rather than destroy it, as most developed countries did, or at least damage it. So this is a very welcome development, and I'm sure that, you know, other countries already, many countries are supporting this kind of thing, but it's very important to have a kind of coordinated effort to persuade emerging economies that you can grow prosperous without destroying nature.
President Xi also announced that China will build more wind and solar power bases in the country's desert areas. How will that help China's target to cap carbon emissions in 10 years' time?
Probably the best hedge against market fluctuations in price, against kind of shortages of fossil fuels, is to build more renewables. You know, that develops your own energy security, and it helps with climate security. So, you know, this is clearly a good move, and to do it in areas that are not in competition for either food growing or grazing or other, you know, economic purposes that human beings would pursue. Desert areas are largely unexploited for any other purpose. So it's a very positive move, I think.
How do you think that Chinese perceptions of biodiversity have evolved over the years?
You know, China didn't have a lot of ecological headroom when it began its enormous industrial revolution, and there was already talk of crisis, you know, by the turn of the century. And that talk of crisis evolved into an understanding that there is a thing called natural capital, and if you waste it, then you are poorer. So that I think what was important in China is that it got beyond the you have to exploit nature to prosper, that kind of dichotomy. And Xi Jinping's speeches, the whole concept of eco-civilization is around a development model which takes a much more harmonious and sustainable view. Now, turning China's economy around is a long and a very large task, but at least there is an impetus to do so, and there's an understanding of the necessity to do so, and that's a big step forwards.
Just looking back at those wandering elephants that captured the imagination of China and the world earlier this year, how important is a moment like that when it comes to getting people behind conservation?
Some of the lessons that were taken from those wandering elephants was to ask the question, why did they wander? What was disturbing them? You know, are human beings encroaching on the last bits of habitat? And actually seeing these elephants, this family group wandering around, I think was very moving for people. I hope also that the longer term lesson is that biodiversity isn't just about charismatic megafauna like elephants or leopards or creatures that we love and admire. Everybody loves pandas, you know, but biodiversity is often about very small and unconsidered things like beetles or even fungi that are essential to ecosystems. And these are things with no appeal to our sentiment, but they're absolutely critical to supporting the ecosystems that we depend on as much as the elephants.